everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have some vinyl pickups to show you. It's been a couple weeks since my last video unboxing that zombie set, and since then I have gotten probably around 13 or 14 things at a few different places, from online to an antique shop to a couple different record stores. So yeah, I just thought I would show you guys what I got. So I'm just going to cover this one more time. This was the first thing in those couple weeks that I got, which was, if you haven't seen my last video, the Zombies Complete Studio Recordings. This was released in February of this year. Sorry if you can't, there we go. I unboxed this in a previous video, and I said I would let you guys know what I thought of it. Since then I have listened to all of these, and they sound amazing. These are fantastic pressings. So what were included on here were their self-titled album and Odyssey and Oracle, and then also included were I Love You and R.I.P. or RIP or Rest in Peace. However, my dog just started barking. Or I'm not sure how it's intended to be said, but those are both compilation albums. And then also included was Oddities and Extras, which was a kind of set of rare and UK only tracks. All of these sounded fantastic. The only one that sounded a bit odd compared to the others, like not up to the same quality as the others, was I'm just gonna call it R.I.P. I'm not quite sure why. It might just need a deeper cleaning. Maybe I could get some wood glue on it, but it didn't. It had a little bit more like surface noise, and I'm hoping that it's just a dust thing and I can fix that up. But everything else, and it didn't even sound that bad, but everything else sounded fantastic. And I'm super happy to have all this Zombies music now in my collection. As I said in that video, they are one of my favorite bands. Definitely one of the most underrated British invasion bands, one of the best bands of the 60s, who released one of the best albums of the 60s, Odyssey and Oracle. But yeah, beautiful little box set with some great music, and I would really suggest this if you are into the Zombies and you want to add a little bit more of their music to your collection. I got that off Amazon, if I didn't say that. And then the other thing I got online, I got on eBay for a pretty good deal. I got it for under $100, which is less than what I'm seeing it go for right now, because it is out of print and it's a part of the bootleg series. So if you do not know this about me already, Bob Dylan is my, I just realized I'm wearing a Bob Dylan shirt, but Bob Dylan is my favorite artist of all time, and I did just start collecting vinyl under a year ago, probably around, I'm not sure, it's been almost a year now since I started collecting vinyl, and I have a lot of essentials pickups to do. And by a lot of that I mean things that everybody would deem essential to their collection, like classic albums. But something else that's essential to me is collecting the bootleg series by Bob Dylan, or you know, with Bob Dylan's music. So I didn't have any of that yet, so I finally picked one up, and this was the one that I wanted most, just because I love this performance, I love the history of it, all of it's just so interesting to me, and that is Volume 4, Bob Dylan Live 1966, the Royal Albert Hall concert. And this is a great little set. I'm sure you all already know this. I got this for a pretty good deal on eBay. I was able to haggle the price down with the seller, and it's in completely perfect condition. I hesitate to ever say mint unless it's in the shrink wrap, but there's not a single flaw on this box set or with the discs. The discs sound incredible. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but it comes with this fantastic booklet. I haven't read through the entire thing yet, but I have skimmed through some pages, and it just has some great photography and just a nice little booklet there. And what it also has is it's a double LP. And I like the way that it's split up because, sorry, I have them in outer sleeves, so they're jammed in there a little more, but I really like how they separated it, because disc 1, or yeah, is disc 1 is the acoustic side, which is the first part of his performance, and the second LP is the electric part of his performance. If you know anything about the history of this concert, this was kind of the first time, or the first era of him starting to go electric, and a lot of these audiences didn't like that. They thought he was selling out, they hated it. So this had a lot of heckling by the crowd. He kind of threw it back at the crowd a little bit, and the performance alone was just fantastic. He just sounds incredible. But it's just a really interesting part of history. This is the performance with the famous Judas from the guy in the crowd yelling Judas. But yeah, so this is the acoustic side, and it includes She Belongs to Me, Fourth Time Around, Visions of Joanna, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, Desolation Row, Just Like a Woman, and Mr. Tambourine Man. Sorry about this glare. Can't really get away from it. But yeah, this sounds fantastic. And then this is the second, which is the electric. So I like that because this is the electric part of the performance, so this is where the crowd starts heckling him and really, really booing. Oh, this light, I'm so sorry guys. But so on the cover here they included him kind of heckling them back. And this side is Tell Me Mama, I Don't Believe You, Baby Let Me Follow You Down, Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, Leopard Skin, Pillbox Hat, One Too Many Mornings, Ballad of Thin Man, and Like a Rolling Stone. And just a really, really interesting part of music history that's just kind of infamous now. Sorry about that. My camera got all wonky and ran out of space, so I had to kind of move some things around. But yeah, so Bob Dylan is Bob Dylan, so oops. So I adore most of what he does, and this era is my favorite era, just the 60s, Bob Dylan, and 70s, but yeah, this really shows kind of his, both his talent and his personality. If you've heard this performance, you know what I'm talking about. Especially if you've ever heard his rendition of Mr. Tambourine Man on that, it's really interesting because he's clearly kind of making fun of the song a little bit, and poking fun at the song and poking fun at the audience. That's because that's his last acoustic song of the set, and I think he's just ready to go on to electric, and you can just tell with him, he's kind of emphasizing certain words and just making a play out of it. But yeah, so I would recommend checking that out if you haven't. I'm sure most of you have. So those are the two things that I bought online, both box sets. And then the next place, or the place that I went to next, I guess, was this antique store that I was just kind of interested in checking out, because this is a huge antique store. It's like 3 or 4 stories, and it's just packed with everything you could imagine, including records. And the records are kind of dispersed throughout the store, so while I was looking around I kept finding more and more. I got 3 things from there. 2 of them are not the best sounding, but it's from an antique store and it was cheap and I wasn't expecting it. But one of them was actually, I'll just show you. So here, this was the first thing I got, which is Eurythmics. Sweet Dreams are made of this. This is has 2 songs. So this includes on side A, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, and then I could give you a mirror on the other side. This was like $2, so I was like, why not? I'll pick it up. It sounds not very great, the record itself. I haven't deep cleaned them yet, so I'm going to try and do that and see if maybe I could salvage it. Like it's listenable, but it's not preferable. But I mean, like I said, it's $2, and picking something up at an antique store or any kind of vintage store, it's always a toss-up. So I wasn't like too surprised. This is a 1982 release, by the way. But like I said, I'm going to try and clean it up and see if I can salvage it. The next one I picked up, I'm trying to kind of educate myself, I guess you could say, a little bit more on the prog rock and some of its big albums. So I picked this up, which I've heard a ton about, but I hadn't listened to, which is Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. And this this was $3, I believe, and I actually really enjoyed this. Like, the whole history of it's interesting, like how it was supposed to be from the point of view of this kid. What was his name? Gerald Bostic, but just like the other one, this one doesn't sound great. It's a little bit better than the other one, but I'm going to try and deep clean this one as well, use some wood glue on it, see if I could salvage anything, because this is a really good piece of music, I guess you could call it, because it's not multiple songs. I know on later releases they split them up, but this is all just one big song on two sides. But it's very interesting listen, and I think it's really good. It was good for me trying to get into prog rock, so I guess if I would suggest, most of you who would be watching these videos already are way, way, way more educated on prog rock than I am, but if you aren't, if you happen to be somebody like me who's kind of just starting to get into it, this is a really good listen to get you into that headspace, and it'll still keep you interested. So the next one I picked up, it was actually very, very good condition. The vinyl has very little to no noise at all, which is shocking, and the cover looks great. Not my favorite album by this artist by any means, but I'm also kind of a completionist when it comes to this artist, so if I find a $3 record like this that I don't own of his yet, I'm going to pick it up. And that is Paul McCartney, Press to Play. This is his 1986 album. I'm not huge on this. I feel like it has a lot of like 80s pop MTV sounds to it, which I don't love, especially coming from him. There are a couple songs on here I really like. Strange Hold is great. I do enjoy Footprints. I enjoy a couple of these, or a few of these, I should say. Some of them I'm just not a fan of. So this is not, in my opinion, his worst album. I know some people, there have been some people who say that this is his worst album. I don't think it's his worst album. I could name a couple more albums that I enjoy less than this, simply because there are a few titles on this that I do like listening to. I'm typically not a completionist to a degree, but with most of the Beatles, namely Paul and George, and to an extent John, I am a completionist. So if I find a cheap McCartney record that I don't own, I'm picking it up, especially when it just looked like it was in great condition, and when I spun it, it sounds fantastic. So I'm happy to add this to the collection. So those were my antique store finds, which I was pretty happy with, because, I don't know, I'd never seen that antique store before, so I thought I would go look around, and I found a couple of nice things in there. So the next little stack I have here is from Dark Side Records, and that's the record store, my local record store that I go to the most often. It's like 10 to 15 minute drive from my house. It's the closest one to me. The management and owners are super nice. It has a huge selection. They have some things that are overpriced, but there are also some things that are priced really well, so sometimes you just go in there and you don't really find anything. Sometimes you go in there and you find a ton for awesome prices. But yeah, let me just get into what I found. So, like I've said, I'm only in the first year of collecting records. I'm almost at a year. I'll be at a year in a few months, or a couple months. But so my point is that I still have a lot of essentials collecting to do, and so I did pick up a few essentials that I had on my list that I knew I needed to own. The first one I picked up, which was one that I've needed, was Bookends by Simon and Garfunkel. You all know this album. This is still in the shrink wrap. It has their hype stickers here, featuring their song Mrs. Robinson, the complete version of their hit Mrs. Robinson, and then also the special bonus full color poster included, even though this was a used copy and didn't have the poster, but I decided to keep the shrink wrap on. This record sounds really, really good, so that was just one I had to pick up. It was cheap. It was like $7. I think that's cheap for the quality of the record, which is great. Very, very, very little noise. For a 1968 record, I think that's pretty damn good. So I'm happy to have that in the collection. Deja Vu by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, one of my favorite bands of all time. Many consider this their best record of all time. I'd have to get back to you on whether I think this is their best record. I'm not quite sure, but I'd have to think about that. But yeah, this is one of my favorite bands. This record is in great condition as well. It has that Atlantic sleeve. This one sounds great. I remember distinctly being surprised at this one too, because this one has very little to no surface noise at all. I get really... this record store tests their records, I think, to a very strict guidelines, or to very strict guidelines, simply because every record I think I've gotten from there, unless it's noted on like a sticker on the sleeve, on the outer sleeve, has been in great condition. Like, this is a 1970 record, and it doesn't, like, sounds immaculate pretty much. Sorry about these reflections, guys, but yeah, I'm very happy to have that copy in my collection. So this next one is another Essentials record that I don't need to explain to anyone. Beggar's Banquet. This also sounds incredible. I got this whole stack, I believe, minus one kind of, but I'll talk about that after. Sounds just fantastic. Comes in that London sleeve. It's a great copy. It's a fantastic copy. The cover is like a tiny bit worn. It has like a little tiny little crack there. It's not that bad though. It has like a little tiny bit of ring wear, but I don't really care as much as other people might, as long as the record is in good shape. And I mean, I don't want sleeves that are completely falling apart. I do like to maintain a little bit of, but this isn't at all. It's in totally fine condition. Ooh, this next one was actually a UK import that sounds incredible. This sounds amazing. Like, this might be the best sounding record I got from this day at the record store. It is, for sure. And that's the UK import of the Yardbirds. Well, in the UK it was released as the Yardbirds, otherwise known as Roger the Engineer, or Over, Under, Sideways, Down. This album was from 1966, but this particular press was somewhere between the summer of '76 and October of 1980. Obviously, with that art, that UK artwork, but yeah, this sounds amazing. Let me take it out of here. Just perfect condition on that EMI Columbia label from slightly later pressings. I actually hadn't yet been into the Yardbirds. I'd heard a few of their songs, but I had yet to like listen to an album in its entirety, really get into them. And I gotta say, I love their sound a lot. And I'm really happy that I picked this one up. This one's a really good introduction to them. And yeah, I mean, all of you know know the Yardbirds, so. And then this next one that I got, so, like I stated earlier, Bob Dylan is my favorite artist of all time. And this is my favorite album of all time, and this is my third copy of it. I guess if there's any album I'm going to have a million copies of, it's going to be this. But I have the stereo version from 1970. I have the original mono press, the first press mono, with the misspell on the back that says meaningful instead of meaningless. And now I have another mono first press of Highway 61 Revisited. Like I said, this is my favorite album of all time. I adore everything about this album. When I first discovered it years ago, I listened to it over and over and over and over and over, and it'd be like all I would listen to until I knew every song. I'm just obsessed. It has just, there's nothing bad on this record. Like a Rolling Stone, it opens with Tombstone Blues. I could name every single song on this and just, it'd be like great. From a Buick 6, From a Buick 6 to this day is such an earworm song for me. It gets stuck in my head and it's just the catchiest rhythm. But yeah, I love From a Buick 6 also. Ballad of a Thin Man, Queen Jane Approximately, Highway 61 Revisited, Desolation Road, just everything on this album. masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece album. And so I was logging this on my Discogs, and so I was putting in the version of which one this is, and this is the one that doesn't have a number down here. So when I was going to log it, I noticed that a couple people had copies of this for sale for no less than $250. So we all know that just because somebody has something for sale on Discogs for a certain price doesn't mean it's worth that much. You know, if nobody's going to buy it for that much, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's worth. But it's just interesting because both of them in big letters had no number on the back, and I'm wondering if that's what made it more valuable, because these were like $250, but I clicked on it and the quality of them was like fair, which this one is much better than fair, but they I don't know, is it valuable without that number? I have a lot more learning to do on that, but it's nice to have another first press mono of this. I couldn't pass it up when I saw it. And my other mono, the one with the meaningful misprint, that's not in the best listening condition. That one I have more just to have it. I just love having that copy. This one is still by no means immaculate, but it's a much easier listen. You could definitely, if you wanted to listen to the mono version of this album, this would be the one I would listen to. My stereo one is still, it's from 1970. It sounds like it was pressed yesterday. It sounds immaculate, but I do prefer most of his stuff on mono, especially his stuff earlier than this, which was just him acoustic. That was always better mono in my opinion. But this one, still prefer it mono. I would love to find like a beautiful sounding mono of this one day, but this I am perfectly happy with until then. And I'm just happy to own another first press. And this one was $30 or $35 in the store. I think it might have been $35. But yeah. Here's that Columbia 2i. This was the first album of his that was released on the 2i label from the beginning. Because that was kind of when Columbia transferred over to that, but yeah, it sounds pretty good. And I mean, there's fading on the cover, but there's no structural issues with it at all. It has like a little name written up here, but I don't mind that. I really don't mind that. And yeah, this is just a fantastic album. You all know this album. Masterpiece, love it. So those were all of my pickups from Dark Side Records. And the last place I went to was this new record store. The name of it is escaping me at this second. I'll put it, the title, or the title, the name of the place here. It was a really cool little place. Had a ton of dollar records. Their records, most of them were priced very, very fairly. And they had a ton of different, some great selections from every genre you could think of for being such a small place. It's not tiny, but it's pretty small. And yeah, I'm definitely probably going to head back there within the next couple of months, but it's a little longer out of my way. It's around 40 to 45 minutes, but it's worth the drive in my opinion. And I picked up some very essential albums, and then one I really want to talk about at the end, which kind of changed a lot for me, but I'll explain that when I get to it. So the first one, Total Essential, don't need to explain this. Second Paul album of this haul, Band on the Run. Don't need to talk to any of you about this because you all know this album. This is the 1973 album, but this is a reissue from 1976. It sounds perfect. Just a great, great solo album from Paul. Is this my favorite Paul album of all time? It could be, but I'd have to, once again, I'd have to, just like with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I would have to kind of really sit down and think about it. But fantastic album either way. Sounds great. I think this was $6, and it sounds just beautiful. There's a little ringwear on the cover, but like I said, I don't mind a little bit of wear, like as long as it's not falling apart. I don't mind a tiny bit of wear on the cover as long as the vinyl sounds good. And then it comes with the original poster, which is a little faded and it smells like old records, but I love it. So that's cool. So yeah, since I didn't own this yet, and I adore Paul McCartney, of course I had to get it. So that was a no-brainer. So I'm very happy to just have this. This was something I needed in my collection for a very long time. Band on the Run. Next one is for me, I guess maybe not for everybody, but for me this was an essential album, and I'm sure you all know it. Stephen Stills 2. Love this. People kind of have a debate. Is it which is better, Stephen 1 or Stephen's 2? I like them both for different reasons. This is from 1971. This sounds beautiful. So I already own Stephen Stills 1, so I'm very happy to own his second album. Not much to say about this. If you know it, you know it. Great album. If you haven't listened to it, which I'm sure everybody watching this has, if you haven't, listen to it. In my opinion, you need to. And okay, the last one I picked up was one I was so happy to find. For some reason, I haven't had very good luck in the past month or so finding this in stores. And online, it was like, the prices was like, I feel like I could find better. This was the album that, for the longest time, I'm a little ashamed to admit it, but I was not the biggest jazz fan, and it was my own fault because I had a ton of respect for it, but I had only heard jazz a handful of times, like, in situations where I was, like, listening to just jazz, and it was never, like, good jazz. It was always kind of, like, off-brand, dull. I don't know how to explain it, but it was very just generic jazz, and so I was never really a fan of it. I never, got deeper into it, which is my own fault. And this year, one of my goals was to really immerse myself in more genres, and one of the biggest genres that I really wanted to get into, in addition to prog rock, and a few others, was jazz. That was like one of my biggest, if not my biggest genre that I really wanted to dive into. But I hadn't, and then like I kind of teetered off. I hadn't really gotten into it much, but around a month or so ago, I was looking at jazz albums that are like, what are good jazz albums? What are some of the best ones? What are some good ones that'll get you into jazz? And I came across this one after I listened to a few albums, and I heard about a certain performance on it, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting, and I listened to it, and the entire thing just blew me away. It was incredible. It showed me what jazz could be, which is something that I literally, when I listened to the album for the first time, I listened to it, and then I went back to the first song, listened to it again, and then I listened to it for a third time. And I still wanted to listen to it more, but I had to go to sleep. And since then, I have listened to this album on Apple Music, like on my phone, many, 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 many times. And it's incredible. Let me just show you what it is. It's Ellington, live at Newport, or Ellington at Newport. This album is, I don't know, is this a random, I'm still very new at jazz, so I'm not sure how weird it is that this was the album that got me into jazz, or maybe this is an album that a lot of people love. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people love it, but anyway. This is now my oldest album, too, because this was recorded in 1956, and this is a 1957 pressing, so this is my oldest album, and it sounds gorgeous. I got it, at $10. They sold it for $10, and you could tell, obviously, from the way it's recorded, it's from the 50s. It's not some, like, audiophile recording that was pressed onto vinyl. It's a 1957 live recording. But the condition of this vinyl is insane, and if you told me that it was pressed in 1957, I would never believe you. It was $10 at the store, and just completely immaculate condition. If there's any surface noise, it's barely a couple little tiny pops, and it's only like in between songs. So obviously the famous song off of this is Diminuendo and Crescendo in Blue, with Paul Gonsalves's huge 24-27 chorus length sax solo, which blew me away, or still does blow me away every single time I hear it. It just gets me so hyped up. I can't focus on anything else when that song comes on. And just you hear the crowd in the back, and you hear Ellington in the back, and everybody's just so excited. And it completely, not even just that song, this entire album is fantastic, and like I could listen to it over and over, but of course that song is the highlight, and it's just so much fun, and it's, I think I would say it's probably like 15 minutes. So good. I'm sure most of you have heard this. It's just as like somebody who's new to jazz, this discovery is just like, oh. So yeah, this album is very special. It will always be very special to me because this is the album that got me into jazz, and I am officially an Ellington fan, and I am officially a jazz fan because of this album. So Ellington live at Newport, or Ellington at Newport, I don't know why I keep saying live, but yes, Ellington at Newport, fantastic album. I'm very happy that I found it in the condition that it's in. Like I said, it's a 1957 pressing, mono obviously. It's on the 6i Columbia label. It's if it didn't have these couple of scratches on the label, like in the middle, I would have not even guessed that this would have really been played. But yeah, just a brilliant album. And the album that really got Duke Ellington's career back on track. And I can see why. Or the performance that got his career back on track, I should say. But very, very, very great album. So yes, that is everything that I bought. Sorry if I rushed through certain things and then stuck on certain things, but that's how it works, right? When certain albums, everybody knows you don't have to take too much time. Certain albums resonate with you or have little stories, and it just happens. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. Leave a comment down below. Which of these albums have you listened to? Which haven't you? Which do you like? Which do you hate? Do you recommend anything for me? Because like I said, I'm still not even up to a year quite on collecting records, so I still have a ton of like essential record collecting to do. Which a lot of these records I have on a list. Like I know these albums, but if you have anything to suggest to me, please by all means do. Anything that you think I need to hear, anything that you enjoy, let me know. Thank you for the comments I've received so far in my last couple videos. Everybody's so incredibly sweet, and you just take the time out of your day to either make suggestions or just comment. Just very nice. Everybody in this community is extremely, extremely nice. But yeah. So subscribe if you want to see more videos. And like this video if you liked it, and like I said, comment, and that's it for today. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye.